The phone rang while I was trying to get the dishwasher loaded, the kind of ringing that cuts through the noise of the rinse cycle. I wiped my hands on my jeans and picked up. It was Nurse Elena from the clinic in Hamden. "Hi, Melanie," she said, her voice bright and efficient. "I just wanted to call and thank you for being so flexible with the new physical therapy schedule. It really helps us out to have those Tuesday slots open. I appreciate you coordinating that with the family." I stood there with a soapy plate still in my hand. "I'm sorry, what schedule?" There was a short, polite pause. "The shift for your mother. The move from the morning sessions to the late afternoons. You mentioned on the phone, or maybe it was an email, that the afternoons worked better for your commute." I hadn't spoken to Elena in 3 weeks. I hadn't sent any emails. I didn't even know the physical therapy hours had been a point of discussion. "I think there's a mistake," I said. I haven't talked to anyone about the commute." "Oh," Elena said, her tone shifting slightly, the brightness dipping. "I might have the notes mixed up. I'll check the chart." "No worries at all. We'll just keep it as is for now." I hung up and looked at Jeff. He was sitting at the kitchen table, sorting through a stack of closing documents for work. He didn't look up, but he shifted his weight in the chair. "Did Elena call?" he asked. "Why would she be thanking me for something I didn't do?" Jeff shrugged, his eyes still on a title report. "Sean's probably just trying to streamline things. You know how he gets when he's managing the office. He likes a clean calendar." I walked over to the counter and picked up my phone. I opened the group thread with Sean and Jeff. I scrolled back through the last few days. There were a few photos of Mom eating gelatin and a message from Sean saying, "Mom is having a steady morning. Adjusted the PT. Thanks for the support." Everyone he hadn't asked. He hadn't even suggested it. He had just presented it as a finished decision and thanked us for a support we hadn't actually given. Sean had been the one to handle the insurance appeals last year when the home health aid was denied, and he'd spent 3 days on the phone with the provider to get it fixed. I remembered how relieved I'd been then, how it felt like he finally had a handle on the logistics. "Did you tell him it was okay to change the hours?" I asked Jeff. "I don't know," Jeff said. "I might have mentioned that Tuesdays are heavy for you. I just wanted things to be easier." I looked at the group thread again. I started to type a question about who had actually spoken to the clinic, but I stopped. I deleted the words. I didn't want to be the one to start a fight over a Tuesday afternoon. I put the phone face down on the counter and finished loading the dishwasher. The rest of the evening felt heavy, the kind of quiet that happens when you're waiting for someone to say something they don't actually mean. Jeff had moved from the kitchen table to the living room, leaning back in his recliner with a glass of water. He looked relaxed, or maybe he was just good at pretending to be, while he waited for me to drop it. I sat on the edge of the sofa, staring at the muted television. "It's not about the Tuesday, Jeff. It's that he told a professional I'd agreed to something I hadn't even heard of. It makes me look like I'm not paying attention." Jeff sighed, a long, slow sound. "Mel, why make a thing of it? It's just a time slot. The point is that Mom is getting her therapy. Sean's the one doing the driving and the waiting in those sterile lobbies. He's just trying to keep the wheels turning." "I can drive on Tuesdays," I said. "I just would have liked to be asked." "He probably thought you would say yes," Jeff said. He didn't look at me. He was watching a commercial for a local law firm. He's always been the one to jump in and organize. Remember when he spent that whole weekend sorting through the old files for the insurance company? He's got a way of just deciding. It's how he runs his office. I remembered that weekend. Sean had been exhausted, his eyes bloodshot, but he'd gotten the home health aide approved when I had just been staring at the denial letter, not knowing which form to file first. He'd stepped in and fixed it, and I'd let him take over a lot of things, because it was easier than fighting over the process. It's a pattern, I said. It's convenience, Jeff corrected. He finally looked over at me, his expression softening into that particular look he used when he wanted me to stop being difficult for the sake of the room. Look, we already agreed that Sean would take the lead on the long-term stuff, the house and the accounts. If he's the one who's going to be managing the estate and the transition later, it just makes sense for him to manage the appointments now. It's less friction for everyone. I frowned. I didn't remember agreeing that his future role as the executor gave him a mandate to speak for me in the present. Or maybe I had, in some vague conversation 3 years ago, when we were all feeling optimistic about Mom's recovery. Jeff had a way of remembering our agreements as more formal and comprehensive than they actually were, usually when it served to keep the peace. I didn't say he could lie to the clinic, I said. He didn't lie, he just streamlined the communication, Jeff said. He stood up and walked toward the kitchen, his voice trailing off. I'm going to start the coffee for tomorrow. Just let it go, Mel. He's doing the work. Let him have the win. I stayed on the sofa, the blue light of the TV flickering against the wall. I thought about the group thread, the photo of the gelatin, and the phrase, "Thanks for the support, everyone." It was a polite way of erasing me from the decision while pretending I was part of the consensus. I didn't answer him. I didn't get up to help with the coffee. I just sat there in the silence, listening to the sound of the coffee maker beginning to hiss in the other room. The next morning, Jeff had the coffee ready before I even got out of bed. He'd already laid out his folder for the day's closings and had the kitchen cleared of last night's clutter. That was the thing about Jeff. He was precise with the things that didn't involve emotion. He could coordinate a dozen different parties for a real estate closing without missing a single signature, and he handled the morning routine with the same mechanical efficiency. He had my travel mug filled and a piece of toast on a plate, exactly the way I liked it. You're still thinking about it, he said, not looking up from his tablet. I'm not, I said, though I was. I was thinking about the way Nurse Elena had sounded, so certain that I was the one who had requested the change. It wasn't just the Tuesday slot. It was the image of myself that Sean was projecting to the world. In that version of the story, I was the helpful, flexible daughter who was perfectly aligned with whatever Sean decided was best. It's just a schedule, Mel, Jeff said. He finally looked at me, his expression neutral. Sean's just trying to make it work for everyone. He's the one who's there most of the time. It's easier if he just handles the logistics. I don't mind the logistics, I said. I mind being erased from them. Jeff didn't answer. He just pushed the toast toward me and went back to his emails. He didn't like it when I tried to turn a practical arrangement into a conversation about respect. To him, if the result was that Mom was getting her therapy and no one was shouting, then the process was a success. I spent the rest of the morning driving between 3 different rental properties in New Haven. It was a gray, damp day, the kind that made the asphalt look oily. At the first unit, a tenant was complaining about a neighbor's dog, barking at 3 in the morning. I stood in the hallway, listening to him go on and on, my mind drifting back to the group thread. I wondered if Sean had told the clinic that I'd mentioned my commute, or if he'd just made it up to make himself look like the coordinator. I tried to focus on the tenant. I'll send a notice to the other unit, I told him. But if it happens again tonight, just let me know. I can't do much about a dog at 3 a.m., but I can document it. The tenant didn't seem satisfied, but he stopped talking. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed. It was a message in the group thread from Sean. Mom's in a great mood today. PT went well. She's exhausted, but happy. I'll handle the pharmacy refill for the blood pressure meds so you guys don't have to worry about it. I stared at the screen. So you guys don't have to worry about it. It was phrased as a favor, a way of lifting a burden from our shoulders. But the burden he was lifting was the only way I had of knowing what was actually happening with Mom's health. If he handled the refills, he handled the pharmacy conversations. If he handled the PT, he handled the progress reports. I started to type, I can do the pharmacy run this week, but I stopped. I thought about the look on Jeff's face this morning. That quiet, pleading desire for things to just stay smooth. If I pushed back now, I'd be the one creating the friction. I'd be the one making a thing out of a favor. I deleted the message and put the phone in the cup holder. When I got home that evening, the house was quiet. Jeff was in the den, and I could hear the low murmur of the news. I went into the kitchen and saw a small pile of mail on the counter. There was a brochure from a home care agency that Sean had mentioned a few weeks ago, with a few notes scribbled in the margins in his tight, clinical handwriting. I didn't pick it up. I just stood there for a moment, looking at the notes I hadn't been asked to read. And then I started the dishwasher. I didn't go to the clinic to argue with Nurse Elena, but I did decide to stop by Mom's on Thursday. I told myself it was just because I had a property walkthrough nearby, but I really just wanted to see if the great mood Sean had texted about was actually happening. Mom's house always smelled the same, a mix of lemon wax and the faint metallic scent of her oxygen concentrator. She was sitting in the wingback chair by the window, wearing a cardigan that was buttoned wrong. She looked small, her skin almost translucent in the afternoon light. "You're here early," she said, her voice thin. "I had a walk-through on the next block," I said, kissing her cheek. "How are you feeling?" Sean said the PT has been going well. Mom frowned, looking toward the hallway. The PT, yes, I think they're coming later. Sean said the schedule changed. Did he tell you when? I don't know. Sometime after lunch, I think. He told me it was better for you. I paused, my hand still resting on the arm of her chair. Better for me? He said. You couldn't make the mornings anymore. That your work was getting too busy? She looked at me with a sort of vague apology, as if she were the one who had caused the inconvenience. I told him I didn't mind the mornings, but he said it was settled, that you'd already talked to the clinic. I didn't know what to say to that. I looked around the living room, noticing a half-empty glass of water on the side table and a pile of unfolded laundry on the ottoman. Sean's texts had made it sound like a seamless operation, a well-oiled machine of recovery and support. But Mom was sitting there in a mismatched cardigan, waiting for a therapist she didn't want in the afternoon. Believing I had requested the change because I was too busy for her. I'm not too busy, Mom, I said. I know, she whispered. You've always been the busy one. It's fine, Sean handles it. I stayed for an hour, mostly in silence. I helped her fold the laundry, the warm towels smelling of a cheap detergent Sean must have bought. I didn't bring up the clinic or the commute again. It felt too small to fight about in the middle of her living room, and I didn't want to confuse her. When I got home, Jeff was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with a sandwich. How was Mom? He asked. She's fine. She's just waiting for the PT. Right, the afternoon slot, Jeff said. Sean really nailed the timing on that. He mentioned it's much easier for him to swing by after he closes up the vet office. I stopped in the doorway. He told Mom it was for me. Jeff chewed slowly, looking at me. Well, it is for you in a way. It keeps the peace. If she thinks you're the one who needs the change, she won't complain about the afternoon heat. It's just a white lie. Mel, it makes the whole thing smoother. It makes me the reason she's unhappy with her schedule, I said. She's not unhappy, Jeff replied, his voice taking on that soothing, dismissive quality. She's just old. She doesn't need to know the logistics. She just needs to know we're all on the same page. I looked at him, not the look of a revelation, just a tired realization that we were living in two different versions of the same house. In Jeff's version, the truth was a tool you use to keep the surface smooth. I walked past him and went into the bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the group thread. I looked at the photo of the gelatin from 2 days ago. I started to type a message to Sean, something about being honest with Mom, but then I remembered the way she had looked at me. That fragile, trusting apology. I deleted the text and turned the phone off. I lay back on the bed and listened to Jeff humming something in the kitchen. The sound of a man who believed everything was exactly where it should be. Saturday morning was a day for the things Jeff actually enjoyed, the kind of maintenance that had a clear beginning and an end. He spent the first few hours in the garage, reorganizing the shelving units for the winter gear. He worked with a focused, rhythmic precision, moving heavy plastic bins of holiday lights and snow shovels with a level of care that he rarely applied to our conversations. I watched him from the kitchen window, leaning against the counter with a cup of tea, wondering how long he could keep pretending that the silence in the house was the same thing as peace. The phone rang around 11. Jeff had left his cell on the workbench, and it buzzed loudly against the metal. He didn't answer it immediately. He finished sliding a bin of salt bags into place before wiping his hands on a rag and picking up. "Hello," he said. He listened for a moment, his expression remaining neutral, though he shifted his weight. "Right. Yes. No, I'm not sure about that. I thought, yeah." He paused, listening again. He didn't look toward the kitchen, but I could tell he was thinking. "I'll have to check with Sean. He's the one who's been coordinating the refills." There was another pause. Jeff's brow furrowed. "I don't have the insurance card. I don't actually know which pharmacy you're talking about. The one in Hamden or the one closer to her house?" He listened, then sighed. "I'll call him. Just hold on. I'll get back to you." He hung up and stood there for a second, staring at the phone. I walked out into the garage, the air smelling of damp concrete and old cardboard. "Who was that?" I asked. "The pharmacy," Jeff said. He didn't look at me. "Apparently, there's an issue with Mom's blood pressure medication. Something about a prior authorization that lapsed. They said the refill request was sent in, but it's just sitting there." I felt a familiar pull in my chest, the immediate urge to take the phone, call the doctor's office, and spend 2 hours on hold until the authorization was pushed through. It was this same impulse that had kept me in the background for years, the need to quietly repair the things that others had broken, so that no one had to feel the embarrassment of a failure. "Sean said he was handling it," I said. "He did," Jeff replied. He sounded tired. "He texted the group and said we didn't have to worry about it." "And now we're worrying about it." Jeff didn't offer a defense this time. He didn't tell me to let it go or remind me that Sean was the one doing the driving. He just looked at the shelving unit he'd just perfected, as if the order of the bins could somehow compensate for the gap in the medication. "I'll call him," Jeff said, though he didn't move. You don't have the insurance information, I reminded him. You don't even know which pharmacy they're calling from. I know, he said. He finally looked at me, and for the first time in a week, he didn't look like he was trying to manage my mood. He looked genuinely annoyed. I told him I'd help with the house stuff, but I can't help with this if I don't have the actual details. He just tells me it's handled, and then the phone rings, and I'm the one who doesn't know what's going on. I waited for him to ask me to fix it. I waited for the request to just make the problem go away. But Jeff just stood there, the rag still clutched in his hand, looking at his phone as if it were a foreign object. Do you want me to call the clinic? I asked. Jeff hesitated. He looked at me, then back at the phone. No, he said slowly. He said he had it. Let him figure out how to fix the authorization. He's the one who told the pharmacy he was the primary contact. He didn't put the phone back on the workbench. He held it tightly in his grip, his knuckles white, and walked back toward the house, without saying another word. He didn't ask for my help, and he didn't offer a solution. He just left the garage door open, letting the damp October air drift in over the neatly organized bins. I followed Jeff into the kitchen. He didn't sit down. He just leaned against the counter, staring at the coffee maker. He looked like he was trying to decide if he was actually angry or just inconvenienced. You're really not going to call them? I asked. If the authorization lapsed, she might run out of pills by Monday. He said he had it, Jeff repeated. He sounded like he was reciting a script he no longer believed in. If I jump in now, he'll just say I'm interfering. He's already complained that we don't understand how much he does. I understand he does a lot. I just don't understand why he has to pretend I'm not here while he does it. Jeff sighed and finally looked at me. Mel, remember when we were trying to get the loan for the second rental? When the bank was being difficult about the down payment, and Sean lent us that $10,000 just to bridge the gap. He didn't make a thing of it. He just did it. That was 6 years ago, Jeff, and we paid him back with interest. It's not about the money, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. It's about the way he handles things. He takes the hit so we don't have to. That's just how he is. If he wants to be the one in charge of the pharmacy and the clinic and the house, maybe we should just let him be the one who has to deal with the lapsed paperwork. I stood there, the silence of the kitchen, feeling heavy and artificial. I wanted to reach for the phone. I could imagine the conversation, the polite frustration with the receptionist, the specific way I'd navigate the insurance portal to find the missing form. I could fix it in 20 minutes. The thought of Mom sitting in that wingback chair, unaware that her medication was in limbo, made me feel a sharp, cold spike of anxiety. It felt mean to just watch it fail. Who told him he could speak for me? I asked. You keep saying he's taking the lead, but I never signed off on that. Jeff shifted his weight, looking away toward the living room. I don't know. It happened. During the holidays, maybe. We talked about the house and the estate, and he mentioned that it would be simpler if one person was the point of contact for the medical stuff. I thought it made sense. I didn't think it meant he'd start telling people you were too busy to visit. So, you agreed to it. I didn't agree to a contract, Mel. I just didn't stop him. It was peaceful. Everyone was happy. You were happy, I corrected. He didn't answer. He just picked up his phone and started scrolling. He was retreating back into the version of the day where everything was streamlined. I spent the next hour in the living room, pretending to read a magazine, but I was actually listening for the sound of the phone. I kept imagining the pharmacy calling back, the frustration in the voice on the other end, The moment Jeff would finally break and ask me to step in, I felt like I was holding my breath, waiting for the collapse so I could be the one to catch the pieces. Around 2 o'clock, Jeff's phone buzzed on the coffee table. He didn't pick it up immediately. He let it vibrate twice before reaching for it. "It's Sean," he said. He answered it on speaker. "Hey." Sean's voice was loud, sounding like he was walking through a windy parking lot. "Listen, there was a glitch with the prior auth on Mom's meds. The pharmacy messed up the coding. I'm on it. I've already called the doctor's office and they're resubmitting it now. It should be ready for pickup by tomorrow morning. Just wanted to keep you guys in the loop so you didn't worry." Jeff looked at me. His expression was a mix of relief and a lingering, stubborn annoyance. "Thanks, Sean. We were wondering about it." "No problem," Sean said. "I've got it handled. I'll swing by and grab them on my way home from the office. Love you guys." He hung up. Jeff leaned back into the sofa, the tension leaving his shoulders. "See? Handled. I told you he'd figure it out." I looked at the magazine in my lap. Sean hadn't mentioned that the pharmacy had called Jeff. He hadn't apologized for the lapse or the confusion. He had simply framed the failure as a glitch and positioned himself as the only person capable of resolving it. I didn't say anything. I just got up and walked back into the kitchen to start the laundry. I felt a strange, hollow sensation in my chest. Not because the problem was solved, but because the cycle had completed itself exactly as intended. I opened the group thread and saw a new message from Sean. It was a photo of Mom smiling, holding a cup of tea. "All settled here. Everything is under control." Monday morning arrived with a drizzle that turned the New Haven streets into a slate gray. I didn't tell Jeff I was stopping by Mom's on my way to a tenant meeting in East Haven. I didn't want to hear him tell me that I was creating friction. Again, I just wanted to see the pills. I wanted to see if the glitch had been smoothed over, or if the solution was another one of Sean's shortcuts. I found Mrs. Gable, the neighbor from across the street, trimming her hedges. She was 74 and spent most of her day observing the traffic on the block. She waved me over with a pair of garden shears. "Melanie, I didn't expect to see you today," she said, her voice loud and friendly. "I've seen Sean's car here every single day this week. He's practically living here." "I'm still around, Mrs. Gable," I said, keeping my voice light. "Oh, I know, dear. But with all those properties of yours, it's just such a relief that Sean stepped up. I told him the other day, it must be such a weight off your shoulders to have him handle the heavy lifting. You can just come and enjoy her company without all that stress." I stood there for a second, the damp air clinging to my coat. I wanted to tell her that I didn't mind the stress, that the heavy lifting was how I knew my mother was actually okay. But Mrs. Gable was already turning back to her hedge, her decision made. In her eyes, and likely in the eyes of the other neighbors who saw Sean's car in the driveway, I had been relegated to the role of the visiting guest. I was the daughter who was too busy to be useful, and Sean was the martyr who had filled the gap. Inside, the house was quiet. Mom was in the kitchen staring at a small orange plastic bottle on the table. "Sean brought your medicine," I said, walking over to her. "He did," Mom said. She didn't look up. "But these aren't the same." I picked up the bottle. The medication was the correct dosage, but the pharmacy had switched the brand to a generic. The pills were a pale yellow instead of the stark white she'd taken for years. "It's the same medicine, Mom. Just a different maker," I said. "I don't like them," she whispered. "I told Sean they looked wrong, and he said it was fine. He said the pharmacy was out of the white ones, and that it didn't matter. He told me not to worry about it." I looked at the bottle. Sean had handled the authorization and handled the pickup, but he hadn't bothered to check if the change in appearance would rattle a woman who relied on the familiarity of her routine to feel safe. He had solved the logistics of the refill, but he had ignored the person taking the pill. I reached for my phone to call the pharmacy and see if they had the brand name version in stock, but I stopped. I thought about the glitch and the handled text. If I fixed this now, I was just the silent repairwoman again. I was the one who cleaned up the mess while Sean got the credit for the delivery. "Do you want me to call them?" I asked. Mom looked at me, then looked toward the door, as if expecting Sean to walk back in and tell her it was fine. "He said it's settled, Melanie. I don't want to make a fuss." I put the bottle back on the table. The silence that followed was heavy, the kind of silence where you realize that the person you're trying to protect has started trusting the lie more than the truth, because the lie is easier to manage. I left her there with the yellow pills. When I got into my car, I saw a message from Jeff. "Sean just texted. He's taking Mom to a specialist in Hartford on Wednesday. He said he's already cleared it with your schedule. See you tonight." I didn't reply. I just sat in the car and watched the rain hit the windshield. I didn't reply to Jeff. Instead, I opened the group thread and typed, "I didn't clear Wednesday. I have a walkthrough in East Haven, and I'm not available to help with the Hartford trip." I put the phone on the passenger seat and drove to my meeting. I didn't check the messages for 2 hours. When I finally did, there were 4 from Sean. "I thought we talked about this on the phone," T, the first one said. "Maybe I misheard you, T," the second one followed. "Can you just move the walkthrough? It's a specialist, Mel. We can't just push it. Let me know when you've moved it so I can tell the office I didn't move the walkthrough." I didn't explain why I was suddenly unavailable or remind him that we hadn't spoken on the phone about Hartford at all. I just left the messages sitting there, the little blue bubbles of his escalating urgency. When I got home, Jeff was in the kitchen, looking at his phone with a pinched expression. "Sean's stressed. He says the specialist's office is confused because he told them you were handling the pre-appointment history forms, but you haven't sent them in." "I didn't know there were forms," I said. "He says he mentioned it," Jeff replied. He looked at me, his voice returning to that cautious, peacekeeping tone. "Can't you just do the forms tonight? It would take 10 minutes, and it would stop the back and forth." "I'm not doing forms for an appointment I didn't agree to," I said. If he told the office I was the point of contact for the paperwork, he can call them back and tell them he was mistaken. Jeff sighed and leaned against the counter. "You're making this a power struggle." "I'm making it a fact," I said. The next 2 days were loud with Sean's frustration. He didn't apologize, but he spent his Tuesday evening on the phone with the Hartford clinic, trying to explain why the coordinated plan had fallen apart. I could hear him in the background of a brief call he made to Jeff, his voice tight, strained, the sound of a man who had spent years building a reputation for efficiency only to have the administrative gears jam. He had to spend his own time redoing the history forms and rescheduling the transport he'd promised Mom, all while trying to maintain the image that everything was under control. I watched from the living room as Jeff paced, his phone buzzing incessantly. For the first time, Jeff didn't try to recruit me to fix it. He looked tired of the noise. On Thursday, the primary care doctor's office called. They had heard about the scheduling confusion and the conflicting reports regarding who was managing the care. The doctor, a woman who had seen Mom for a decade, didn't sound angry, just practical. She told us that the family communication was becoming a barrier to the treatment plan. She suggested a professional care coordinator, a neutral third party who would handle the calendar, the pharmacy, and the specialist intake. Sean tried to argue that it was an unnecessary expense, but the doctor insisted it was the only way to ensure the medical records stayed accurate. By Friday afternoon, the clinic sent over the digital intake packet for the coordinator. I watched the group thread as the link arrived. Sean was the one who had to sign the first page of the agreement, officially handing over the role of primary coordinator to a stranger. He didn't send a message after that. He just clicked sign and the thread went silent.